again, this annual provider review is something we will do every year. We have specific measures in our state plan that CMS requires we report. CMS is kind of where our funding comes from. Of course, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services is what CMS stands for. And they require to report on these specific measures that are in our plan, as I mentioned. And one of those measures is ensuring that our providers, both the agency and the individual providers, meet the required qualifications as identified in the state plan and attested to during provider enrollment. So we're just going back and double checking everyone's meeting what they attested to and our requirements in the state plan. And I know some of the providers have been through this last year. And maybe some of you are new to it this year. So keep in mind, this is only the second year we've done this, and we're still learning and growing the process. So if there's things you question or don't make sense, reach out and let me know. So the state has put together 2 different provider review reports to collect the data that we need to report to CMS. These reports were sent via email to your agency, along with a frequently asked questions document to hopefully try to answer some questions you may have had right off the bat. If you don't have access to these reports, they're actually on our 1915I website. So they're out there. If you need direction, can't find them, reach out to me and I'll get them to you. So the provider agencies will use the 1915I provider agency report and the individual provider review report to review their agency and all individual providers affiliated during the reporting period. So we're just looking at what's happening during the reporting period. And for this round, we're only reporting on the month of August and September. And we did that because the first time we did our review, there was a lot of confusion on some of the requirements and qualifications, and we took things back and revisited some things, and we wanted to give kind of a grace period for the providers, the agencies, to get back into compliance to move forward. So hopefully things will look a little bit better this time around. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to first go over the provider agency report. And I'm not going to read through this whole report entirely. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to kind of look at it. But again, the requirements in this report, the agency attested to during provider enrollment, saying, for example, yes, we're going to ensure our providers are competent. We're going to ensure they meet qualifications. I think there was like 12 different attestations, maybe less, I'm not sure. So this report is just collecting some info to go back and say, this agency is proving to us that yes, they are meeting what they attested to and what's in our state plan. So as you can see at the top, this is just the provider agency review report. You'll just type in who the report was completed by and the date and the name of the agency. And again, the reporting period I filled in is just for the month of August and September. And so the purpose again is to collect all requirements for 1915I provider agencies outlined in the state plan and attested to during the enrollment process. And this report is used for required CMS reporting and is an annual review for the department to ensure compliance with the 1915I regulations. So I'm not doing this to torture you. So like I said, please don't kill the messenger. We do have to report on this stuff, collect data and report back to CMS. So we're not doing it just to make your lives difficult. So the instructions is pretty basic. The provider agency shall complete a review report if you were enrolled during the reporting period. So if you're on this call and your agency is not yet enrolled to provide 1959 services, you're not required to fill this out. But if you were enrolled to provide services in the month of August and September, you must fill out this report. And so number 2, the agency shall attach to this report supporting documentation relevant to each requirement. And the documentation must prove that the requirement has been met. And so the documentation in particular for the provider agency report here, we're looking for policy. Policy written by your agency for the 1959 program. So 3, if all required documentation is attached for a requirement, just select the yes checkbox. And if not, select no and explain the agency's plan of action to address the non-compliance. So if there's something your agency's not meeting right now, the state wants to know what's your plan to address that and get into compliance with 1959 regulations. And number 4, the provider agency shall submit annually, along with their policy or other supporting documentation, to the state Medicaid agency at our 1959 email by January 1st. So we're hoping, 3 months is enough time to collect your data and submit to us. We are on a timeline, so I can't really be too lenient because we got to collect our data. Then we have to meet as a team and make strategic plans on how we're going to improve things and what we're going to do to keep things moving forward, getting better and improving our program. And then again, we have a deadline to report this information to CMS. So I'm just going to scroll down here, and I'm just going to run. Oh, pardon.
Question for you, Melissa.
Yes.
If we submit this early, almost like a preview to you, could you give us feedback, and then if we're missing anything, you can let us know before the final date?
You're more than welcome, but I can't guarantee I'll get to it. I'm a one-man shop right now. So I'm doing my best to stay afloat. I would assume I should be able to get to it within the next, probably a month or so to give you some feedback. It wouldn't be immediately. But yeah, feel free to do that. We're here to help you guys, not make this as difficult as possible. So if that's what you want to do, feel free to do that, but I don't want to make any guarantees. I will obviously respond to you if I'm not able to get to it, but I would say, these aren't due till January, so yeah. So I'm just going to run through a few requirements here just to give you a general idea of what the state is looking for. Again, I hope you've had a chance to read through them. So I'm not going to go through the report in its entirety, but so requirement 1, we ask that your agency provides documentation of internal policy that requirements of individual providers of services meet required qualifications initially and ongoing. Policy should state if agency keeps a copy of a degree in the individual provider's file. So this is up to your agency how you want to write your policy, and it might look different for every different agency. Maybe your agency's offering different services than another, so you can focus on what are the required qualifications for a care coordinator. You want that in your policy. If you're doing peer support, what are the qualifications for peer support? Put that in your policy. And just, we ask your policy addresses, how are you ensuring your individual providers are meeting those requirements for those services? If you're unable to provide that, or if you don't have that and you answer no to this, the state wants to know what's the provider agency's plan of action to address non-compliance. So every requirement has a little box for you to explain what's happening here. And we know policy is ever changing. It might not be in a final format, and that's fine. We just ask that you send us what you do have or what you have in a draft form for these reports. So another example, we'll go through requirement 2. Agency provided documentation of internal policy that services agencies enrolled to provide are within the scope of practice. So policy should state agency will provide oversight to ensure individual providers are providing services within the scope and within the provider's roles and responsibilities. So again, this might look different for every agency, depending on the 1959 services you're providing. Every one of our service policies has that scope of practice in it, so you don't have to figure that out on your own. It's all in our policy. If you're doing care coordination, the scope of practice is in there. The state wants to know, how are you ensuring your individual providers are within that scope, and keeping them within their roles and responsibilities, to ensure the best service delivery for our clients. So I'm not, like I said, I just wanted to go through a few examples. And if we go to the bottom of the report, I think there's 12 here. So just pay close attention. Requirement 9, or excuse me, 10, 11, and 12, there's service specific. So like 10 relates to housing support. If this doesn't pertain to your agency, just select NA. 11 is for non-medical transportation. If your agency isn't enrolled to provide that, then again, select NA. And then requirement 12 is for pre-voc, supported ed, and supported employment. And if you go all the way down to the bottom here, we ask that if you have any comments, please feel free to fill them in, sign and date. And then the very last page is for the department. We will look through your report, your documentation, determine if your agency is in compliance or not. I know I added in a lot of comments last year of what was maybe missing or needed fixing. Sometimes I just gave some recommendations. You could take them or leave them. And then I'd sign and date, and I will send my findings back to you. Whoever sent me the report, I'll be sending back to that person. So if you want to include, who all needs to be involved in your agency, that's who I'll respond back to it and let you know what was determined. So I'd like to open it up for questions on this specific report for the agency. Does anyone have any questions? Is anyone new to this year that's on the call? Quiet group. I hope I'm not boring everyone. I know this is exciting.
Senka is new to it, Melissa.
Pardon?
Senka is new to it.
Okay. Yep, and we're here to help. Like I said, I know this is new, obviously, for your agency. A few have been through this before, so kind of same old song and dance for the old providers, if I will say. But if there's no questions on the agency report, I'll flip over to the individual provider report. Let me check my chat first here. See anything? Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead. Let me pull up this other. Okay, so this is the second report, and this is for the individual providers. So any of your providers affiliated with your agency for 1959 will need this report completed. It's the same layout as before. Reports completed by and the date, the name of the individual provider, and then the agency they're affiliated with. And again, the reporting period's the same. It's August, the month of August and September. And the purpose of this is the same. We just want to collect data to ensure that our providers are meeting the qualifications in the state plan and as attested to during provider. run through the instructions here. Let's see, number 1. So the provider agency shall maintain a file on each 1915I individual provider within their agency. 2, the provider agencies shall complete a review report for each 1915I individual provider enrolled during the reporting period. So if you're thinking of enrolling some individuals and they're not quite yet, no report needs to be done. It's only for those who are enrolled and are ready to provide services. Number 3, the provider agency shall only complete the service sections below that the individual provider is enrolled to provide. So if you have one individual provider enrolled in 3 different services, you only need to fill out those 3 service sections of this report. 4, it's kind of the same as the agency report. We're asking the agency attached to this report supporting documentation relevant to each requirement. 5, again, if the required documentation is attached and it meets that requirement, select yes. If not, select no, and we ask you explain your plan of action. And 6 is just the requirement to submit these reports annually and to the email address provided by January 1st. So again, I'm not going to run through this report entirely, but here's the section. So you're just going to select what services the individual provider you're looking at is enrolled to provide. We ask that you just check them up in the section here. And then when we scroll down here, the requirements are broken out into each service. So in the blue here, you'll see this is care coordination, and underneath it is each requirement relevant to the care coordination service. I don't want to make everyone dizzy, but if I scroll down to training and supports, all the requirements relevant to that service are listed below. So they're all broken up by service. So again, only complete the sections that your individual provider is enrolled to provide. So I'm going to run through the care coordination requirements here, and I tried to add more content this year. I tried to make it a little bit, I don't know, user friendly, if you will. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'll be making more changes to this next year. But so for requirement 1, we ask the agency provide a driver's license or whatever, some other form of identification, verifying that the individual provider is at least 18 years of age. So pretty easy. Scan a copy of the driver's license and attach it and select yes. Requirement 2 gets a little bit more complicated. So this is our competency requirement. One of the attestations in provider enrollment was ensuring that your individual providers are all competent in the service. And so what that means for care coordination is number 1, one of these courses, if you will, or certifications must be completed and submitted. So the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration core competencies, or the Case Management Society of America standards of practice, or successful completion of the state-sponsored care coordinator training. So one of those 3 things must be completed to meet requirement number 1, and I need some sort of proof attaching that. I don't know, you might get a printout after you complete some of those. You might get a certificate. If not, we asked for it like an attestation signed by that individual provider stating I completed this on such and such date, and identify what it was that you completed it. Number 2, person-centered plan development and implementation. Care coordinators are obviously required to be competent in that, and so we ask at a minimum the provider agency documents the individual provider has reviewed the plan of care policy, the person-centered planning and assessment guide, and the THERAP plan of care creation guide. And again, I know some agencies might be a little bit different, but maybe they have some sort of training log you can attach to this report as evidence of proof, excuse me, that this was completed by the individual provider. I know one agency has a really nice like online portal training, so they can print things off, and that's their proof of their practitioner completing the competencies. It identifies the date, the course. It's pretty neat. So again, if you don't have something like that, again, I just ask for an attestation of some sort by that individual practitioner, stating that they did complete this policy review, if you will. Number 3 is the home and community-based settings rule. Our care coordinators need to be competent in that area. And so again, I have a little brief description of what we're asking for. The provider agency must document their provider has reviewed the HCBS policy, the HCBS settings rule training. That does actually provide a certificate, so I ask that that get attached. And also review the HCBS settings assessment guide. So when all of those 3 pieces are done, you can select check off number 3 and attach the documentation as proof. Number 4, home and community-based settings rule compliance verification training. So at a minimum, the agency must document their provider has reviewed the HCBS review form and HCBS heightened scrutiny form. And so I just want to also point out, most of all of this is online on 1959 website. All of our policies, all of our training, it's pretty much a one-stop shop, except for number 1 here. We don't have access to that substance abuse and the case management society. I don't think that is on our website. That's something you would just have to Google. But everything else as far as policies and our trainings that we're requiring here are. So I probably should have stated that at the beginning here. And number 5, we ask that our care coordinators know the applicable policies and trainings for their role. And I noted here kind of what policies pertain to this service that we're asking the care coordinator to review. And again, just attach that attestation stating that they've done so. Check off number 5. Number 3, we need to verify the care coordinator is meeting their qualifications, such as the bachelor degree that's required. So this was changed from last year. And so number 1, any bachelor degree from an accredited college or university will now qualify to enroll as a care coordinator. So we ask you attach a copy of that certificate or that degree or the transcripts, however you want to do that. And they also need to have the 1 year of supervised experience working with special populations. And noted under there is provide a description of the experience, setting, and dates of that particular experience. I know the question will probably come up, we did just change this policy the end of July 27th, I believe. And so any care coordinators that were enrolled prior to July 27th, if they do not meet that 1 year of experience requirement, that's okay. We're going to let you kind of grandfather in, and by next year you will have that experience. So hopefully that won't create any issues. And then number 2, 3 years of supervised experience. Excuse me, you have to meet number 1 or number 2. So if you don't have the degree, we need proof that you have 3 years of supervised experience. And for that experience, again, provide a description of that experience, what setting those services were offered in, and those dates those services were provided. Requirement 4, provide documentation individual provider is supervised by an individual meeting required qualifications by providing one of the following. So again, the supervisor for the care coordinator needs to meet number 1 or number 2. And so I just want to point out throughout this report, there's a lot of and there's a lot of or. So just pay close attention to what the requirement is asking. It's kind of why I put emphasis underlining number 1. You just need to meet one of those. Again, if you answer no, the bottom here, to any of the above, what's your agency's plan of action to address the noncompliance? So those are the requirements for care coordination. Again, I don't want to run through every single service, but a lot of it is the same when we're asking for experience. We want a description of that experience. What did you do? How did you do it? What kind of setting was it in? Was it a hospital? Was it a rehab clinic? Days or months, years you provided that service. We just, as detailed as possible. I know a lot of different agencies have asked, can we just submit a resume? And you sure can, if you want to prove some of these requirements, as long as your resume details, again, the description of the experience, the setting, and the dates. So if you just need to add some of that into the resume, that's fine. However your agency chooses to do so. And again, it's broken down by service.
Melissa, may I ask a question before you go on?
Sure.
So I have a few questions in the care coordination section there.
Okay.
So with the requirement 2, that first number 1 there, I see it says or successful completion of state-sponsored care coordination training. From my
Yes.
understanding, we've been asked to put people through that case management standards, as well as send people to care coordination training. I just want to clarify, that's an or there, or is that supposed to be an and?
Were you talking about the substance abuse here? Mental health?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. That
so
last or in that one.
okay, nope, you just need one. So it is or. You do the substance abuse, or this is just for proof though. I'd have to go back and look what's in our care coordination policy. There might be a requirement to, it's not in policy right now, to do the care coordination training. We're thinking of adding it.
Got it.
But for purposes of this reporting, you just need one of those 3 things.
Understood. Understood. And then the next question I have, you and I worked quite a bit on this last year on this section here, this requirement 2. Is what we
Yes.
provided last year from a community option standpoint, is that sufficient again this year?
Oh,
As again,
absolutely.
okay,
Yep, like
perfect.
are you referencing like your training?
The online module
System?
that you and I worked
Yes.
through, and then we had them
Yeah.
press yes that they approve. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that
Perfect.
was very nice, very slick. And I
Perfect.
understand, not every agency has that, but it's very,
Certainly.
very nice to have that.
Certainly. And then the last question I have for you is, would you be able to provide maybe a description or an example of that description of the experience, setting, and date service are provided? I know you mentioned a resume, but do you have another example potentially of that? I'm just a bit nervous about maybe some of the staff that were enrolled with us during this time, but have now left us since now. And now with this new requirement in there, maybe they provided services in the first part of August, but I can't go back to a termed employee and say, can you please provide me the dates, services, and locations of the things provided. And a resume more than likely probably is not going to list the setting from my
Right.
experience. And I don't know if I feel comfortable updating people's resumes without
Right.
their approval, their signature, something of the sort.
Sure, and two though, if there is a resume submitted and it's like it says Sanford Hospital, just for example. Well, I don't really need a description of that setting because I know what that is. You know what I mean? And I trust me, I understand some of your individual providers are probably no longer with your agency. So that information is hard. It's pretty how can you uh, get it, and I understand that. So do the best you can with the information you have. I'm not asking you to reach out to these terminated individuals and get this information. You know, if you just have a resume, then that's all you have to submit, and that's fine. But if you do, say you do still have an individual provider on staff and you have that ability to get that information, we ask that you do.
Certainly. And if you could provide example, I would definitely get that from all enrolled providers now and all future enrolled providers. Again, that would help us make sure that we're definitely dotting our
Yeah,
our I's here and crossing our T's, as you mentioned earlier.
yeah, I can definitely do that. I will draft something up and probably run it by our team, and then I can send it out to this group. Um, just so you have a better understanding of, yeah, maybe that's something you can collect on the front end in case someone decides to leave your agency, then you have that information to submit for your annual report. Might be a good practice.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you very much, Melissa.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Austin. See, these are things I don't think about because I'm not running a business. So it's good to know. It's good to hear your side of things.
Melissa, I have one question too, on that
Yeah.
same subject of requirement 3, the 3 years of supervision experience. Last year you had us, we had to get approval. Do we need to get an approval again or not?
You mean approval as far as hiring somebody?
Well, let's see. You said that we, like the exception letter that we needed
Oh,
for
yeah, see,
approval?
we're no longer doing that. We're no
Okay,
longer, because right now, when we changed our policy, we're accepting any bachelor degree. And before it was specific fields.
gotcha,
So
okay,
no, you no longer need to send,
okay,
any requests of any sort along those lines. Yep,
thank you.
you bet. Does anyone else have any questions? This is pretty much all I was gonna run through on the individual provider report.
I'm
And
sorry,
again,
I have one more.
sure, no, go ahead.
It's in the instructions, the number 2, where it says the provider agency shall complete a review report. Does that mean we have to submit our policy, the provider policy, with each individual provider?
No, nope. So what you'll do is your agency will do, the first report that we looked at, the agency report,
Mhm.
and the policy only needs to be submitted with that report. With
Okay.
the individual provider report, we're just asking for the documentation on that specific provider.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. I was gonna just scroll down to the bottom here. I don't want to make everyone dizzy. So again, it's laid out the same. The provider agency can add comments, and date and sign and send to that email address. And then medical services will review it, determine if you're in compliance or not, and send it back to you with our findings. So um, again, this is a learning process for both sides. We've only done this once before, and so I'm sure I will learn a lot more again this time around, and hopefully make it more improvements for next year's review. So does anyone, I just want to open it up for questions on any of the reports or regarding the process.
I have a question.
Yes.
So last year, after submitting our report, I learned that we were enrolled to provide more services than I was initially told that we were, but we don't have individual providers for those. So should I just mention that in my email when I send you these reports as to why there's no individual provider report for like our care coordination and housing support?
Yeah, it's good to be noted. Just so I know, that'd be very helpful for me. Yes, please.
Hey, I have a quick question. Maybe this isn't the platform for this question, but have you guys ever, or do you, maybe you already do it, when you do those strategic planning meetings, do you ever have like the people, like boots on the ground people, like having a care coordinator at one of those meetings or a peer support or housing support person, just to kind of get their input and insight on things too during those strategic planning meetings?
Yes, so we currently don't. It is on the radar to have both clients and providers, but it's just a little tricky because we don't want to favor one provider over another. So it's
Right.
kind of like that fine line, but we don't yet. It is in our current plans to do so.
Okay.
Right now, we're basically working on those plans. We're working on fixing things that we've found in our last review. And then we're working on the many page report I have to submit to CMS. So we
Okay.
haven't quite gotten there yet. We only do 4 quarterly meetings a year, but that is something that we want to do down the road.
Sure. And if even if there was a way to do like a random poll where if you, I don't
Yeah,
know how, like, to, so then there wouldn't be any question on favoritism. It would just be a random poll.
yeah,
And then that
it's a good
person, those
idea.
people could be asked. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because of course we want your feedback, we want the client's feedback, we want to know what's working, what can we do better, what are the gaps? Yes, we're working on it.
Awesome. Awesome. And thanks so much for everything you do.
Yeah, well, thank you guys, because without you, we couldn't be here. So we appreciate it.
I have another question. I'm looking in the peer support individual provider
Okay.
review. And number 2, that we provide documentation that the individual provider has reviewed and is competent and person-centered planning implementation. So, like, should we just put together like a statement they can sign, or how would you like
Yep,
that?
yep. If that's all your agency can do, that's what we ask. Just have them, unless you have some sort of training log, um, of some sort. Maybe I know some agencies might have like a report that's given to their individual providers of the required trainings per year. That could be submitted, or you could just have the required trainings or policies that have to be reviewed and just have that individual provider sign off and date it. That's sufficient too. However you'd like to do that. Like Austin said, his agency has like a computer based, and I might not be explaining it right, but all their training is done on like a computer program, and so they can print off kind of the roster of what was completed so that they submit that. That's evidence enough that it was completed. So
Okay, I'll have to check. I don't know if the state already has something in our learning system for this or not.
chat here.
Melissa, I have one other question in the peer support area.
Sure.
Requirement number 4. So we have a few peers that are, I hate to say this, but let's just say they're green. They're freshly new,
Yeah.
into the role. And I don't know, I mean, how do I say this? Some of them don't have like degrees or any schooling besides a GED or a high school diploma. And, they're just freshly new. We have a lot of new ones. So a lot of these, they're not going to meet the requirement.
Okay.
Is there,
Well, so
Yep.
number 4 specifically, that's the one you were asking on, right?
Mhm.
Number 4.
Yes.
So number 4 is more relating to the supervisor of the peer support specialist.
Oh, whoops. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yep. So, yep. No, that's great. You pointed out because you probably wouldn't be the only one questioning that. So, yep, number 4 is in relation to the supervisor.
Melissa,
Okay.
this is Brittany from Community Uplift. I have a question about that. Actually, I just asked Cody. I was looking at the site and I'm not seeing like a specialized supervisor training for peer support. Is there one, or is it just because in the normal peer support training, it says if you're going to be supervising peer support, Do you know if there's like I can message Christy Johnson too, but I just didn't know. I figured I'd ask while I was on here.
I guess I'm not too clear on your question. Are you talking about this peer support training offered by the state?
Yeah, it says in number 4, it says, where's it at? Completed a state-approved peer support specialist supervision training.
Okay, that I'm not clear on.
Okay.
There
that
is a
would-
recording of one because I asked that. We lost our registered supervisor for our peer supports just last week. So I reached out to Christy and found out there is an archived recorded
Okay.
supervision training, and it's listed on that peer support site. She did encourage people to, if they haven't had the regular peer support training, that they go to that week-long training too, in
Yeah,
addition
and I've
to
had
just the
that one.
supervision.
I've had the week long. I'm just wondering about the supervision one. I'm on the site right now looking, and recorded trainings.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the refresher and the ethics. Oh, I see it now. Okay, I will sit down and watch that. Thank you guys.
You bet. Well, thank you guys for pointing that out, because the supervisor training, I haven't seen it. I just know that there must be one if we're requiring it. It was written in the state plan, so the powers that be above me must have known there's some sort of training. In the chat, Katie asked a great question. So if one of our staff members was enrolled as an individual provider, but never provided any services in a reporting period, does that report still need to be completed? And it does. We have to make sure that that individual provider meets required quals and requirements. So
Perfect. Thank you so much. I thought so.
you
Appreciate it.
bet.
So along the lines of the peer support, number 3 now.
Okay.
Requirement number 3, the certified as a peer support specialist. We have a couple that, just started just at the end of September, so made that cutoff to
Okay.
be qualified into this audit. And so if they don't have a certificate mailed to them prior to us submitting the report, how do we go about that?
I just wanted to point out what Melinda's asking here. Requirement number 3 is having that certification through behavioral health. If you don't have it yet, just note that, and I'll find out who I need to reach out to double check it. Maybe you'll get it in the next 3 months. I would hope so. But if you don't, just note it, and then Monica will know who I can reach out to double check that.
If they do need to go to the training, there is one in Fargo in November, and then the next one won't be until I think it was February.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And that's a week-long course, right?
Yes.
Stop sharing. Austin says, off topic, but if any providers are looking to get individuals certified in adult mental health first aid, Community Options is offering a virtual training. Oh, nice. Thanks, Austin. That's great. That's very helpful. Anyone else have anything? If something comes up when you kind of start digging into this process, you're like, oh shoot, just send me an email or give me a call. I will advise you as best I can, and you might have a question that I don't know the answer to yet. And I will have to reach out to our team and get in a consensus and get back to you. But like I said, this is only round 2 we've done this, so we learned a lot from the first time. And I'm sure we're gonna learn a lot more this next time as well, so. If there's no further questions, I will let you guys get some time back in your day. I appreciate your attendance. Again, feel free to reach out to me and I will try my best to get you through this fun process. So I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa, for all you do.
Thank you. Bye-bye.